because the only people for me are the mad ones. The ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved, desirous of everything. The ones that never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but burn, burn, burn like fabulous yellow Roman candles, exploding like spiders across the sky.
Station. Welcome to the show, and you are it. You're on the home stretch, final leg of the trip.
Here on Route 1, all the way to Caribou. I feel like we're on NPR.
Are you? Would you say you're in the house at this point in time?
I'm totally in the house. Yes, the bunny's in the house.
1.3. Departure runway 35. Tower frequency 119.5. Clear for arrivals. Contact Denver radar 20 miles out. From the south.
Feeling good, man. Looking out over Sunken City. That beautiful sun coming up over the horizon.
How you doing?
That's a quote from Jack Kerouac on the road.
It? Sick. So much traffic.
Getting to it. That was a long ass drive.
That was a lot of traffic.
It was smooth sailing for the most part. It just was so long.
I know a lot of people have talked about getting up to Limestone for the previous festivals, right? So this was my first time heading up to Maine for a Phish festival.
One of my favorite all-time quotes, to the point that I've had it memorized probably since I was about 16.
So I was with a group of friends, about 4 or 5 of us.
We had been in Camden on July 30th.
A bunch of them, they went to both nights at Camden before it.
They played 2 nights. They played July 30th and July 31st, and the festival was starting on August 2nd.
I did not go to the 30th, which I think in retrospect, most people think is the better show.
We're leaving directly from Camden after the 7:30 show, which was a banger of a show.
But I did go to Camden on the 31st.
I took this exact copy on the road with me on Phish Tour on 99. It was on my friend's dashboard.
So me and Skinny, my best friend and co-host on Stub Me Down, we were with a third friend, and the 3 of us literally jumped in the car at midnight or a little after we hung out in the parking lot in Camden and started driving to Maine.
It was like we were never going to get there. We drove all the way up from Camden, and we must have stopped over maybe in Connecticut, just at like a roadside Motel 8 or whatever. And we took off early the next morning.
And drove straight through the night, which was an experience because we were obviously coming from a show. So like we were still like running off of that energy from the show, but there were some moments where it was a little bit sketchy, driving.
4 years later, I'm walking into it, and that quote is painted on the gate, the fence on the way in.
And I remember we stopped at a McDonald's the morning before we went for it. And I had not had McDonald's breakfast for years before, and I haven't had McDonald's breakfast since. And we thought to ourselves, well, we don't know the next time is going to be when we're going to get food.
And by the morning of the 31st, we were basically like right by the border of Maine.
And I'm not joking, of that whole crazy weekend, one thing that I remember the most was eating the McDonald's hash browns. And then having the thought of, I better appreciate this, because we had not a ton of food. It was our first overnight festival for all of us.
To me, that was, kind of a wink from the universe.
So we knew we had like a little bit more to travel, but we felt good about being, at least in the state.
It was letting me know that I was in the right time in the right place.
And then we realized, oh my God, we still have another, whatever it was, 4 hours, 5 hours to drive to Limestone.
We got through the town of Limestone at a pretty normal clip, like 25, 30 miles per hour as you would drive through any small town.
It's kind of like when you're wandering in the woods and you're on a path and it's getting a little bit dark outside and you're not sure whether you're on the right path or not.
We made it up there, and we were there a day early. So we were there like the night of the 31st.
And what I remember the most about that segment was just people waving to us, everyone outside their stores, their homes, with big poster boards, welcome Phish fans. Of course, everything spelled with a PH.
Because everywhere you look, that could be the path, that could be the path. Am I on the right path? How would I know? And then you see the little marking and you're like, yes, I'm right where I need to be.
Well, they're not going to like start lining people up or anything like that. So there were some farms, I guess, like people's yards, and they were like, charging people $10 and you could set up for the night.
That's what that was to me. Seeing that quote on the gate.
Little kids coming up and selling for like dollar lemonades, things like that.
So we went in and we set up and we started to like unpack, just enough to like have a couple beers, make some food.
The search for it, by the way, like the name it, I'm pretty sure comes from this too, and that the lyrics, the quote there was no coincidence.
It was really wholesome with everyone stopping at every gas station that had their little billboards outside that's like, welcome fans, we love Phish.
And then somebody walked through and they were like, they're letting cars in. And so it's like 9:30 at night or something like that, 10 o'clock at night. And we're like, fuck it, let's break all this stuff down and let's go see if we can get in line.
Because Kerouac talks about the it in the book. Of course, it's kind of a universal concept as well. Lots of people have talked about it.
And once we got through town and got on whatever it was, Route 1, I think, then we got into traffic, and that was like 13 or 14 hours of gas break.
They weren't letting people in, but they let us line up in the car lanes. So again, just like Big Cypress, we were there on the early side, so we were in the first probably couple hundred cars.
It is like the moment that it captures the sense of like transcendence and epiphany that that we're all seeking. And certainly Kerouac's characters were always in search of the great it, the pearl, the pot at the end of the rainbow.
And so I remember getting out to pee, walking a few steps, and as I was peeing, just looking up, and I've lived either in or outside of New York City my whole life, where you can't really see a lot of stars, even on clear nights, but looking up in the middle of nowhere near Canada, like that northeast tippy top part of Maine, feeling like I could reach out and grab a star from the sky.
And so we slept in the car while we were in line. And I remember like the sun came up. There was a friend of mine who I hadn't seen in a while that was like walking around and found us and like woke me up by knocking on the window.
But what that thing is, what it is, personal to you. For me, it definitely meant being at it that weekend. And, that indescribable, exhilarating, profound sense of being in the moment.
And I was probably high like crazy. We were just nonstop smoking bowls the whole time. But it was to the point where feeling sober was almost like feeling high. Like we were just so involved in our little globe of Phish world that being stuck in traffic, we were excited to be stuck in traffic because in the back of our minds, we knew Valhalla waited on the other end.
We did the car search. I think they opened it at like noon on the 1st or something around that time frame, 11 o'clock. And, we had the car search and we went in and we were in.
Well, that's not just it. That's also a great Antelope Jam or, a great David Bowie right before it comes down back into the head of the song, or a great Tweezer for that matter.
Around 2 p.m., I think the first day, we were driving, we were getting closer and closer, and we had the orange like traffic signs on the sides of the highway that said Phish Festival with like duct tape arrows pointing like go this way. And to me, that's like, oh my God, we're here. We're here. The signs are now pointing us into the right direction. Like I'm feeling the energy now, so many years later. I feel that excitement. It's so visceral.
The thing that struck me the most when we pulled in was the sign that they had right at the gate, and it was a big arch, and it had an I on one side and a T on the other.
You step through the gateway, and you know that you're going from the ordinary into the extraordinary, from the common into the uncommon, from the mundane into the magical.
all of a sudden there was the iconic traffic directors spelling out the word "it" with the enormous gate at the front. That's like Jurassic Park.
We were clued into that because the arch, the great, it rather, said, "Our intent is all for your delight."
And then connecting it, it said, "Our intent is all for your delight."
And that's also a literary reference, by the way. It comes from Shakespeare, from A Midsummer's Night Dream.
And so that was like the thing that you saw as you were driving in, and you're like, wow. And that really kind of stuck with me like throughout the weekend.
The idea and the concept that our intent is all for your delight. I think it's we did not come minding to content you. Our true intent is all for your delight. Is the actual quote.
We all just got out, took our shoes off, and just stood in the grass for a little bit. And the first thing we did was go to set up our tent, set up our little grill, and stereotypical as ever, have some beers and grilled cheese sandwiches.
There was a lot of mud. There was a lot of wet ground at it. And so we went to a couple of different spots to try and find something dry enough that we could, park and camp right there. And we couldn't. So we ended up finding a decent spot, but once again, like Oswego, we were camping on the tarmac.
Here we are now, 2003, looking at like Superfly Productions looked at Clifford Ball, looked at Lemon Wheel, looked at Oswego and all the Cypress and all that, and said like, all right, let's model what we are going to do after Phish and put on a multi-band, multi-day thing.
After we got to eat, we got to fill our stomachs a little bit. Our first instinct was to start walking toward the playing grounds because it was already the mid-afternoon. And what were we going to do? Just sit around?
And I went to that. I went to the first Bonnaroo. And I felt like a veteran at that because of Phish. And there were people who had never been to festivals before, but heard about Phish's festivals, and they went and just...
It was so far away. They must have parked us a mile from the playing grounds, and I'm not even exaggerating. We had the longest walk, and on the way, we were picking up beers. People were selling something on both sides of the walkway, the runway, the tarmac.
It's like seeing a kid who never drank go to college for the first time. And like, they're the ones that are going to get alcohol poisoning and get arrested for fighting. Like, same thing with festival people. It's like, all right, we could tell it's your first one. Like, stay hydrated, fucking take a break, there's nothing to prove here.
And I'll never forget the best edible I've ever eaten in my entire life. Someone was selling ganja grilled cheese.
But then going to it, I felt like we had now seen kind of full circle this like festival growth of the actual event from Clifford Ball to it.
And I ate that at probably around 3:30, and that was not the first thing I'd ever eaten. That was like, like mushroom brownies or whatever. But this stayed with me for like 11 hours throughout the whole show.
And I just mean in the sense of like amenities. It felt a little more grown up.
It was very potent. So thank you to whoever it was selling ganja grilled cheese at it.
So in terms of the interactive art villages, you had, the Ball Square, and then the Went Central, and then the Green for Oswego, and whatever that swamp city village town front was called, it bid Cypress, and then at it, you have Sunken City.
Food, water, when am I ever looking for a cup of like lemon ice? But it was there, and I got it and happily cooled off with it, Like everything was everywhere.
Sunken City, to me, was the epitome of and the apex of Phish's art installations.
And it felt more whole, like it felt more like put together and ready.
Which looked like a city that it would sound like it sounds. You had a Bob's Big Boy that was buried halfway into the ground, and some buildings that were also buried halfway in the ground, but you could kind of see in them. And in one, a band was playing. I guarantee it wasn't Phish, despite what some Spunions might tell you. but this band was playing, you know, very weird music.
I think they had like a village set up that was kind of like in the trees, and it was a little bit spooky, especially at night. And you could go in these like little sheds and shacks, and
There also along the tree line was kind of like an Ewok village there, and that there was kind of a path, like, you know, a tree bridges and whatever you call them, suspended in the trees.
you know, people were like smoking them out, and you know, it was like a little like artistic village, I guess, that they had created.
There also another element to not only the art installations, but to every Phish festival that I love, are the performance artists. And because there are performance artists there, and because there are art installations, and because it's not a spectator sport going to these, it's participatory, and therefore there's a performative aspect to it.
Although I also do remember, now that I'm thinking about it, the image of the water tower that had the Groucho Marx glasses, big nose, and mustache.
Traditionally, when a performance artist engages with me, I engage back in character. Just like that, I snap into something and I play along, and it kind of takes them by more surprise than they take me. And so this guy, I guess, handed me a roll of tape, and I'm looking around and I'm taking my cue from what everybody else is doing with these, you know, boxes and boxes of rolls of tape. And I'm seeing that this is something we're supposed to be doing, which is taking the tape and masking taping the trees and making one big spider web or a snowflake or web of a maze of masking tape through the trees.
But we walked all the way there, and vibes were just through the roof. To your earlier question, I now felt like I was at a Phish festival. Like someone was telling that story about the Great Went or the Clifford Ball. Now I could tell my story about it.
Which, you know, that is what we were supposed to be doing. Of course, not only was I doing that, but I also was commenting on it as I'm doing it in an imaginary made-up language. And I have no idea why I thought that was a good idea.
Like I was now in this kind of fraternity or community of people who have attended a Phish festival. Like there's those checklists that you have: New Year's Eve, Halloween, festival, the Gorge, you know, all these kind of like to-do lists.
Funny thing about Sunken City. So I thought, I really did think it was just the perfected version of what you could do with a surreal, it's psychedelic. It's meant to be a psychedelic playground.
To me now, I was at a festival, and
The next day, on Sunday, a friend of mine, I really want to say his name, but I won't. He was convinced that sometime after Phish's third set, but before their 2:30 a.m. Tower Jam, that he saw Phish perform in the woods an entirely other secret set. And that I think either he was the only one there, or maybe there were like, you know, a dozen other people. And I'm pretty sure he's still convinced of it this day.
we were next to one of the towers that had a camera, and they were very high definition cameras. I remember noticing at the time when HD was kind of new, and they had the big screens for Phish, and we felt like we were in a really good place.
Musically, this is one of my favorite festivals. And they really played into that slogan, "Our intent is all for your delight."
The first set, the lights were not on yet. It was still sunny out. I remember AC/DC Bag was good, but the thing that blew me away more than any was Yamar.
They opened with AC/DC Bag, and then like probably the most insane Yamar I've ever seen, which was like 17, 18 minutes.
This Yamar must be something like 20 minutes long. And it was when I realized that at this festival, no one has to go anywhere.
Yamar is not like a jam vehicle, right? But they just felt the room to do it. And Trey even remarked, like, we've got no place to go for 3 days.
And that's been a recurring theme throughout your series, that it's very cut off. The whole event is isolated. from elsewhere. And that's when it really sunk in for me that Yamar is usually like a 7 or 8 minute song at most with a big organ solo. This Yamar goes all over the place.
The Reba that they played on day one is probably the best one I've ever seen live. And those two songs really set like the festival Phish type of atmosphere.
Reba was outstanding still in the first set. It really brought everyone up on the same level because it's the old fan favorite everyone was excited for.
After the Birds of the Feather, the crowd started chanting Cheesecake, which was like a nice callback to Big Cypress.
Meat Stick was fun because people were still into the dance. I was my first Vultures, which was very exciting, and I just couldn't get over Fishman's drum fills at the end. And
we had a really, really good time. The music there was scary at times.
Down with Disease, the jam was outstanding. The Waves was an all-timer for sure.
There was a 20-minute Waves during that first day.
Stuff I love. Like I love scary Phish, you know. So like, Waves and that era stuff, Pebbles and Marbles, and like all that round room stuff was kind of being played at that time. And
my other favorite thing from day one was they did a dog log into Mango Song, which they had done at Merriweather in 2000, 9/17/2000. So that was like a fun callback because that's a really strong, that was a great show, that Merriweather show. And then when they did the dog log Mangoes, especially us that, love Merriweather, we're like, oh, that's so awesome.
I think it was I really do think that it was my favorite festival. It certainly was my favorite in terms of the extraneous stuff about a festival. In terms of the Sunken City was my favorite of the art installations that they have done, and the performance art there. And there's just an ease to it too that they had achieved. And then of course the Tower Jam, which may have been the best secret set. It may have been.
The Tower Jam at that was wild.
It was after the show. We had walked back to the car, grabbed a couple beers, and we were like walking around on the tarmac. And at one point we were walking away from the control tower, the tower.
We were actually sitting on the hood of a car that was like, it was one of those things like you didn't want to be too close because you couldn't see all the way up.
At one point I turned around and it was lit up in like the stage colors, right? Like that base purple that they have before, they come out. And I was like, that wasn't like that before.
Because everything was always happening on the top. So you wanted to be far enough back where you can like see the dancers coming down the tower.
So we started walking back to the tower, and when we were like approaching it, then we're like, oh shit, they're gonna play, like something is happening here.
And see all like the crazy fucking chant, calling the aliens that they were doing that night.
All of a sudden, you start to see like the smoke coming off the top, and then you see like the silhouette of the band up there. You're like, holy shit, they're up there.
I mean, it was a out of otherworldly experience. It was definitely the Tower Jam, in my eyes, kind of like always takes the cake.
Still to this day, my favorite, ambient secret set jam that they've played is the Tower Jam.
For the weird hidden sets and stuff, Tower Jam to me is like, that was pretty fucking sick, dude. I mean, the Tower Jam was nuts.
I mean, as we're watching acrobats get lowered down on the top of the tower and start like dancing on the sides of the tower.
They had like bungeed, like just repelling dancers that were, and I feel like there were some curtain things going on, and oh my God, it was cool.
Kuroda was just lighting the fuck out of it, and there's smoke rising from the top, and it looked like almost like a torch.
There was something about that, because we were looking at that tower like it was some like obelisk the whole time, and we're kind of like, what's going on up there, you know? Like, and then everybody's walking back and it just lit up and it's like, get the fuck out. They're up there.
They settled into like this really cool groove that wasn't a song or anything, but it was just definitely like a groovy jam ambient sound.
And it was just so intense. And everyone was just like, it seemed like it went on forever too. Like it was it was a lot.
You know, and I remember hearing the next day, like people had missed it, like they'd passed out or whatever and didn't see it.
We were asleep at the time of the Tower Jam. I'm sorry to say.
Which I don't know. I mean, unless you were literally asleep, like there was no place that I can recall on any of that where you couldn't see the tower. So like you would know something was going on if you were like sitting out by your car, you know, smoking a butt and drinking a beer, like, oh shit, something's happening over there. Like it was pretty obvious.
Like we walked by that tower like a lot that whole time. You know what I mean? Like it was part of the walk to and from the concert grounds. And then you look at the map afterwards and it's like, you know, they knew exactly what the fuck they were doing. Like they when they were setting it up, they're like, all right, let's set up the exit of the concert grounds to walk right by the tower so we can get everybody. Yeah. And also like while it's happening, people could, you know, so we were already out in the parking area going towards the tents. And that's when it just all started. And it was like, that's my favorite secret set.
But to this day, the Tower Jam is I think the top. Maybe it's because it was like the first one of those that I've seen, but there was just something unbelievable about like, holy shit, they're up at the top of that thing.
It was just like it felt like that thing was just going to lift off and fly to space. Like it was so cool.
If I could go back and relive one day of the IT Festival, it would be the second night for sure. When they opened with Daniel Saw the Stone.
I mean, they started the set with Daniel Saw the Stone, which was fun. They were playing that a little bit more in 2003, like in 2.0. So that was always a fun one to see.
For me as a fan, I'm heralding back to all the old tapes I would listen to, like 8/14/93, which I think is Tinley Park, and they play that song. And I'm now feeling like I'm now part of this kind of shared history.
They had a nice exploratory chalk dust.
This chalk dust torture, again, very similar to the Yamar from day one, is a roller coaster ride. It takes you everywhere sonically you'd want to be with Phish in 2003. It's loud and fast. It's spacey and sporadic. It's really graduate level Phish.
The real musical highlights, though, set 2 opened with Mellow Mood and then into an absolute monster of a ghost that was like over 30 minutes that went a lot of different places. Type 2, like Jam.
Ghost has peak after peak after peak, straight up strong rock and roll. If the Chalk Dust Torture explores a lot of psychedelic rock, Ghost is just pedal to the metal, energy the whole way. And it was the first time I really witnessed my full-on first, hand to God, full-on glow stick war. That was bigger than I could ever imagine in my life. I was not at the Great Went, so I can't speak to that hood, but this seemed like a city glow stick war.
And then the last set, the 46 Days, which was like 40 minutes long.
And of course, the third set opens with what I imagine has to be the longest 46 days ever.
That 46 days, I'm like, there's like 30 seconds of lyrics and then 39 minutes of like just awesome, fun, exploratory, disconnected at times, but totally awesome jam from that 46 days.
And long doesn't always mean good with Phish, but this time it did. This was when the drugs were kicking in for everybody in the crowd, and I imagine on stage, and they visited outer worlds.
So as I said, like musically, I feel like it was It was it for me.
It was amazing. And when I say it was amazing, I'm actually quoting Trey, who said that on the Charlie Rose show after Phish broke up.
And it was sick.
Looking back in his career, Trey goes, he said there were a lot of moments.
I mean, Big Cypress aside, if we're talking, that I think is kind of in its own category. But as far as like the summer festivals go, musically, this one really stands out for me.
And they sounded great. They sounded really good, which I couldn't say for all of 2003 and certainly not of all 2004.
It was really, really great.
He said there were a lot of moments like that.
Easily up there as like one of the top moments.
And then he said, it was amazing.
But here it was truly no pain. Like everything was just hitting on all cylinders.
There's another Kerouac quote that this time I don't have it memorized, and so I am going to read it to you. But from On the Road.
I have this kind of philosophy that it was the demarcation line between when 2.0 was strong and positive and then when it went for a downward turn. I think this set, or it at least as a whole, was where kind of like the last great Phish show at that time.
And just for a moment, I had reached the point of ecstasy that I always wanted to reach, which was the complete step across chronological time into timeless shadows, and wonderment in the bleakness of mortal realms and the sensation of death kicking at my heels to move on, with a phantom dogging its own heels, and myself hurrying to a plank where all the angels dove off and flew into infinity, the stars blinking in the clear night of my death, and all the time I was thinking, it